So I'm out at dawn on my vineyard, coffee in hand, ready for a peaceful morning. Then I see it. 3 guys in cheap neon security vests destroying everything I've poured my life into. One rips my $15,000 irrigation system straight out of the dirt. Another circles my equipment, snapping photos like it's a crime scene. The third yanks mature grapevines by the roots, 2 weeks before the harvest that was supposed to fund my retirement. The sharp, sweet smell of crushed grapes hits me like a punch. Morning dew soaks through my boots as I storm over, blood boiling. "What the hell are you doing on my land?" The leader, some smug clipboard warrior named Derek, smirks. "HOA violations. Remove these unauthorized structures now or pay $500 daily fines." I lock eyes with him. "I'm not even in your HOA, genius," he chuckles. "That's what they all say, buddy." Biggest mistake he ever made. They just messed with the wrong vineyard owner, and what happened next made Derek regret every second of his pathetic power trip. Stay tuned, you're going to love this. Here's what those clipboard warriors didn't know when they decided to destroy my vineyard. I'm the guy who spent 25 years designing guidance systems for million-dollar rockets. When I solve problems, things tend to explode, just not the way my enemies expect. My name's Marcus Delacroix, and 3 years ago I told aerospace engineering to kiss my ass. Cashed out my 401k, bought 15 acres in Sonoma County, and did something revolutionary. I actually researched HOA boundaries before signing anything. Crazy concept, right? This wasn't some midlife crisis impulse buy. I spent months hunting for property outside any HOA jurisdiction, weeks reading every covenant and boundary line. Real estate agents kept pushing planned communities with their cookie-cutter perfection. The smell of fresh paint and artificial landscaping made me want to puke. I wanted freedom to grow grapes, not maintain some suburban fantasy where every mailbox looks identical. My land's got real character. An 1890s farmhouse I renovated with my own hands, 8 acres of premium Pinot Noir that survived 3 brutal winters, and a custom tasting room where tourists actually pay good money to drink my wine. The property borders State Forest on the east, County Road south, and the Meadowbrook HOA community west and north. Remember those boundaries? They're about to become the center of a federal case. The divorce was amicable enough. Sarah got the suburban house with its beige everything and perfectly manicured lawn. I got my sanity and a legitimate second chance at happiness. My adult kids visit during harvest season, love getting their hands dirty helping with the vines. For the first time in decades, life actually felt right. Then Karen Pemberton slithered into the picture. 45 years old, Meadowbrook HOA president for 6 consecutive years, real estate agent specializing in what she calls premium planned communities. Picture every entitled suburban mom stereotype. Add a real estate license and delusions of legal authority. She's married to Derek, our morning's clipboard warrior, and together they run Meadowbrook like their personal fiefdom. 3 weeks before the dawn raid, I'm checking my mail and find this official-looking document. Notice of violation, unauthorized commercial agricultural operation. The cold metallic taste of panic hit my mouth as I read their insane demands. Remove my unsightly farming equipment, restore residential landscaping standards, and somehow make my irrigation lines stop crossing their completely fictional aesthetic buffer zone. The threat? $500 in daily fines starting in 72 hours. The musty smell of legal papers always triggers my bullshit detector, so I immediately called the number. Karen answered personally, her voice dripping with that special kind of condescending honey that makes your skin crawl and your fists clench. "Mr. Delacroix, is it? Look, I understand you're new to community living, but we have very specific standards here that everyone must follow." "I'm not in your community," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "I specifically bought outside any HOA jurisdiction." Her laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Our CCNRs clearly state that properties within 200 feet of our boundary are subject to aesthetic oversight. Property value protection, you understand. It's really quite standard." Knowledge nugget number 1. HOAs cannot retroactively claim authority over existing properties. Always demand to see actual recorded CCNRs before buying, not just agent promises. If they claim jurisdiction over your property, make them prove it with legitimate legal documents. I spent the next 2 days pulling every document related to my land: original 1952 deed, county zoning records, HOA incorporation filings, boundary surveys. That rough texture of aged paper told the real story. My property predates her precious HOA by 40 years. Karen's magical 200-foot rule existed nowhere except in her power-hungry imagination. She was either completely incompetent or deliberately lying. Spoiler alert, it was lying, and her scheme was about to get criminally worse. The distant hum of her community's sprinkler systems sounded like a countdown timer. I had no idea this was just the opening move in a federal conspiracy. Karen didn't waste time launching her harassment campaign. The very next morning, I wake up to county code enforcement banging on my door at 7 a.m. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint claiming my wine tastings violated zoning laws. The irony? I've got every permit filed properly. Learned that trick from my aerospace days where one missing signature could ground $1 million project. But explaining this to a cranky inspector before my first coffee wasn't exactly how I planned to spend harvest season. That was just Karen's warm-up act. Over the next 2 weeks, she turned complaining into performance art. Daily calls to the county claiming excessive noise from parties I wasn't even having. Facebook posts about my irresponsible farming practices affecting our precious children. The woman had more fictional grievances than a daytime soap opera, and twice the drama. I'm trying to run a legitimate business while fielding calls from confused county officials who clearly had better things to do. The clerk at code enforcement actually rolled her eyes when I mentioned Karen's name. "Oh God, her again," she muttered, the exhaustion clear in her voice. That woman's filed 23 complaints in 2 weeks. We stopped taking her seriously after complaint number 5. Meanwhile, my phone's ringing off the hook with tourists canceling wine tastings because they heard rumors about permit issues. Karen's poison was spreading faster than blight through a vineyard. That's when something clicked from my engineering background. When you're dealing with systematic problems, you need systematic solutions. Time to fight back with actual evidence instead of just frustration and righteous anger. I installed security cameras around my property perimeter and started keeping detailed logs of every interaction, every trespass, every bullshit complaint. The sweet satisfaction of organized documentation felt better than my morning coffee. My old project management skills were finally useful for something other than rocket guidance systems. The cameras were the best investment I'd made since buying the property. Within a week, they revealed Karen's first major mistake. Derek and 2 other men were regularly trespassing at night, and they weren't just measuring property lines like they claimed during daylight hours. These jackasses were sabotaging my irrigation equipment and spray painting violation on my tools like some kind of discount vandalism crew. One camera caught Derek's license plate clear as day as he drove off after cutting my main water line at 2 a.m. I remembered reading somewhere that security cameras on your own property are completely legal and provide crucial court evidence. You just can't point them at neighbors' land. Every timestamp and clear image was building my case, while Karen thought she was winning her little war. I started casual conversations during my weekly farmers market runs, where the smell of fresh produce and morning coffee made people surprisingly chatty. Boy, did they have stories about Queen Karen. Turns out she'd been pressuring the county supervisor, her cousin, because of course it's always about connections, for broad rural property reforms. Several former Meadowbrook residents had actually fled the area specifically to escape her tactics. One older gentleman, Tom, whispered that 3 families had sold their properties at significant losses just to get away from her relentless harassment campaigns. "That woman destroyed my neighbor's landscaping business," he said, glancing around nervously. "Filed so many fake complaints the county revoked his permits." One contractor mentioned she owed him $12,000 for unpaid HOA beautification work. Another farmer shared that Karen had tried to have his organic certification revoked by claiming he was using banned pesticides. All lies, all documented, all part of her expanding pattern of destruction. But Karen was just getting warmed up for the main event. She created a Facebook page called Concerned Neighbors of Meadowbrook, posting doctored photos that made my vineyard look like Chernobyl with grapes. The constant crunch of gravel under her patrol volunteers' boots became the soundtrack to my daily routine as they trespassed for more evidence. Her latest masterstroke? Organizing property values patrols, basically state-sanctioned trespassing where HOA zombies could photograph my land for her growing collection of fabricated violations. I scheduled an appointment with Patricia Chen, a property law attorney whose office smelled like leather-bound justice and decades of legal victories. I brought a 3-ring binder stuffed with everything: original deeds, all permits, complaint records, security footage, witness statements, the works. Patricia flipped through my evidence for maybe 10 minutes, occasionally making notes and nodding with professional appreciation. Then she looked up with the kind of predatory smile that makes opposing lawyers suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. "Mr. Delacroix, this isn't just HOA overreach," she said, tapping my documentation. "This is organized criminal harassment with federal implications. Your neighbor just graduated from petty tyrant to defendant in a federal conspiracy case." Karen had no idea she'd just triggered something much bigger than a neighborhood dispute. She thought she was playing checkers while I was setting up chess. The bitter taste of cold coffee during my 5 a.m. documentation sessions was nothing compared to how bitter Karen's mornings were about to become. Karen's next move proved she was either completely delusional or criminally desperate. Probably both, with a healthy dose of suburban entitlement thrown in for good measure. At 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, I hear the rumble of diesel engines and look out to see 3 fire trucks blocking my driveway. Some genius had reported unpermitted structures creating serious fire hazards. I'm standing there in my bathrobe watching firefighters gear up for what they clearly expected to be a major safety violation, while the inspector demands to see permits for my commercial kitchen. The problem? My home winery doesn't need commercial kitchen permits. It's been legally exempt since I filed the paperwork 2 years ago. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixing with my morning coffee created this perfect metaphor for how Karen was poisoning everything good in my life. "Ma'am," the fire inspector said into his radio, "there's no safety violation here. Everything's properly permitted and up to code." I could practically hear Karen's teeth grinding through the radio static, but she was just getting warmed up. 24 hours later, the health department arrives unannounced during my busiest harvest week, interrupting critical fermentation work to investigate numerous complaints about unlicensed alcohol production. The inspector, a tired-looking woman who clearly had better things to do, spent 10 minutes confirming what I already knew. Home wineries under certain production limits don't require commercial licensing. Then came the ABC, Alcoholic Beverage Control, threatening license suspension pending investigation of alleged illegal sales. By now, the pattern was so obvious that even the ABC agent rolled his eyes. "Let me guess," he said. "Someone named Karen?" I'm juggling 3 different inspectors while trying to save grapes that needed immediate processing, explaining the same legal exemptions over and over to officials who were getting as fed up with Karen as I was. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. Best money I ever spent. And I'd blown plenty on bad aerospace contractors over the years. Within a week, my PI uncovered Karen's real playbook, and it was uglier than weak old grape must. She'd used these exact tactics against 4 other non-HOA neighbors over the past 3 years. Same timeline, same false emergency calls, same escalation pattern designed to break people financially and emotionally. 2 families had actually sold their properties at significant losses just to escape her relentless harassment. But here's the kicker. Every property she forced into a sale got absorbed into planned community developments, earning Karen substantial real estate commissions. This wasn't personal vendetta. It was organized fraud with a business plan. The PI discovered something even juicier. Remember Derek, our clipboard-wielding morning destroyer? Turns out he's not just Karen's devoted husband playing weekend HOA enforcer. He's actually employed by Pinnacle Property Management, Karen's real estate company. Those official-looking vests and badges? Complete fabrications. His authority to inspect my property, about as real as his commitment to honest work. This changed everything. Derek's trespassing and property damage weren't civil HOA disputes. They were criminal acts committed by someone impersonating a government official. I remembered reading about cases where fake authority can escalate charges significantly, especially when property damage is involved. I started coordinating with 3 other targeted families, forming what we called the Rural Property Defense Alliance. Sounded official, made us feel better, and most importantly, gave us collective legal strength. Each family contributed documentation, showing Karen's identical harassment patterns across multiple victims. My attorney Patricia had mentioned something called California Civil Code Section 1354, which specifically protects non-HOA properties from CC&R enforcement. Karen's entire 200-foot aesthetic oversight scheme wasn't just wrong. It was criminally fraudulent under state law. Better yet, any damages from her harassment could be recovered through civil lawsuit, plus punitive damages for intentional interference with business relationships. Meanwhile, Karen escalated her business sabotage campaign with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. She started calling my wine distributors, spinning tales about ongoing legal disputes that made me an unreliable partner. Filed complaints with the tourism board about unlicensed commercial operations. Organized coordinated negative review bombing across Google, Yelp, and wine websites. The financial impact hit like a punch to the gut. I lost 2 major distribution contracts worth $40,000 annually. 3 planned weddings at my venue canceled due to her fabricated permit concerns. My winery's online rating dropped from 4.8 stars to 2.1 in 1 week after her army of fake reviewers attacked. But Karen made one crucial mistake that would cost her everything. She got sloppy with success. The PI traced those fake reviews to IP addresses within Meadowbrook HOA community. We had recorded phone calls where she explicitly admitted to protecting our property values by any means necessary. She'd violated real estate licensing ethics by using false claims to interfere with a competitor's business. I continued playing the part of a defeated, financially struggling vineyard owner while secretly building a federal case that would make her regret every illegal breath she'd taken. The rough texture of legal documents was becoming as familiar as grape leaves under my fingertips. The metallic taste of controlled fury became my constant companion as I watched Karen celebrate what she thought were victories. She had no idea she was digging her own grave with every criminal act, and the hole was getting deeper by the day. Karen's desperation reached new heights when she realized her official harassment wasn't breaking me fast enough. Time to abandon any pretense of legitimacy and go straight for financial destruction. She contacted my wine distributors directly, not with complaints this time, but with calculated lies delivered in her most professional real estate agent voice. I'm calling as a community leader to inform you that Marcus Delacroix is facing serious criminal charges, she told my biggest client, a restaurant chain that bought 30 cases monthly. There are ongoing investigations into health code violations and tax evasion. You might want to protect your business reputation before this becomes public knowledge. Complete fabrication, but delivered with such confidence that they canceled our contract that afternoon. The cold, metallic taste of financial panic hit my mouth as I watched 3 years of relationship building evaporate with one phone call. Next, she filed a complaint with the state tourism board claiming my unlicensed commercial operations were deceiving tourists and creating liability issues for the county. Then came the coordinated review bombing. Dozens of one-star reviews posted within hours, all using suspiciously similar language about unsafe conditions and illegal activity. My phone started ringing with cancellations faster than I could answer. The smell of panic sweat became my morning cologne as I watched years of reputation building crumble in real time. Karen wasn't just attacking my business anymore. She was systematically destroying my livelihood. But her masterpiece was the local business intimidation campaign. She visited every vendor I worked with personally, spreading rumors about my financial instability and pending criminal charges. The hardware store owner later whispered that she'd demanded he stop selling supplies to me or face community economic consequences. She walked in here like she owned the place, he told me, nervously glancing around his own shop. Said anyone supporting criminal elements would face organized boycotts from the entire Meadowbrook community. The farmers market coordinator received daily calls claiming I was under investigation for organic certification fraud. Even my insurance agent got visits from concerned community representatives, suggesting my policies might be canceled due to high-risk activities. Within 2 weeks, the damage was devastating. Distribution contracts worth $40,000 annually gone, 3 wedding venue bookings canceled, online rating destroyed. Local restaurants stopped featuring my wines after Karen's whisper campaign convinced them I was radioactive to their reputations. My private investigator earned every penny of his fee that month. He discovered the real reason behind Karen's escalating desperation. Pinnacle Property Management owed $180,000 in unpaid contractor bills and legal settlements from previous harassment campaigns. She needed to force property acquisitions within 90 days or face personal bankruptcy. This wasn't personal vendetta anymore. It was financial survival through organized crime. But here's where Karen made her fatal mistake. She got personally vicious with my family. The PI's surveillance caught her spreading rumors about my divorce, claiming I was mentally unstable and dangerous to local families. She organized neighborhood safety patrols to monitor and photograph anyone visiting my property, including my own adult children during harvest season. When my daughter came up from San Diego to help with bottling, Derek confronted her in the grocery store parking lot, flashing his fake badge and claiming he had community authority to investigate suspicious individuals. The sharp sound of my daughter's panicked phone call still makes my blood pressure spike. "Dad, some crazy man cornered me and demanded to see my ID," she sobbed. "He said I was trespassing in his community and needed to leave immediately." That crossed every line Karen had left uncrossed. My attorney Patricia had been building our case methodically, but this attack on my family triggered federal interest. She contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division and discovered Karen's operation was part of a larger pattern being investigated across 3 California counties. Apparently, property acquisition fraud using harassment tactics was becoming an epidemic in rural areas. I learned something fascinating about California Business and Professions Code violations. Karen's systematic interference tactics constituted intentional interference with prospective economic advantage. This allows recovery of lost profits, reputation repair costs, and punitive damages. More importantly, her coordinated harassment targeting multiple families qualified for organized crime prosecution under state RICO statutes. The Rural Property Defense Alliance expanded to include local business owners who'd been pressured to shun us. We met weekly in my tasting room, sharing intelligence and documenting Karen's expanding web of economic terrorism. But I was playing a much longer game now. Every aggressive move Karen made was being recorded, documented, and prepared for federal prosecution. I allowed her to believe her tactics were working, appearing increasingly stressed and financially desperate while secretly coordinating with law enforcement. The bitter taste of fake defeat was nothing compared to the satisfaction of watching Karen publicly celebrate her successful community leadership. She began telling neighbors that her determined action had nearly solved the rural property problem through legitimate oversight. Derek's aggression escalated to outright criminal behavior when he blocked a wine delivery truck on the public county road, claiming authority to inspect vehicles for HOA compliance violations. When the driver called sheriff's deputies, they informed Derek he had zero legal authority and was committing multiple misdemeanors. But Derek and Karen were beyond caring about legal boundaries. Their 90-day timeline meant bigger, more prosecutable mistakes were inevitable. I continued appearing defeated while building the evidence that would destroy them both. The rough texture of FBI business cards in my wallet felt like justice waiting to be served, and Karen's victory celebration was about to become her confession. The discovery that changed everything came from an unexpected source, Karen's own greed. My private investigator had been digging into Pinnacle Property Management's finances when he stumbled across something that made both of us do double takes. Karen hadn't just been harassing neighbors for kicks or even simple property acquisition. She'd been running a sophisticated financial fraud scheme that made her HOA tyranny look like amateur hour. The smoking gun was buried in SBA loan documents my PI obtained through a contact at the regional bank. Karen had secured a $300,000 Small Business Administration loan 18 months ago, promising to expand Meadowbrook HOA's boundaries by acquiring 6 specific rural properties currently outside community standards. The kicker? She'd listed my property and 5 others by address in her loan application, claiming they were pending acquisitions through community compliance enforcement. She'd literally promised the federal government she'd force us to sell our homes. But it got worse. The loan documents included fraudulent property valuations, fake environmental assessments, and forged letters of intent from property owners who'd never been contacted. Karen had committed federal banking fraud on a scale that made her harassment campaign look like jaywalking. My attorney, Patricia, nearly choked on her coffee when I showed her the documents. "Marcus, this isn't just property harassment anymore. This is organized financial fraud with federal jurisdiction. Your neighbor just graduated from local nuisance to federal defendant facing 20 years minimum." The timeline pressure finally made sense. Karen's loan required proof of property acquisition progress within 90 days, or the entire amount became immediately due. She needed to force sales quickly or face personal bankruptcy and federal prosecution for loan fraud. But here's what made me smile with pure satisfaction. The FBI had already been investigating similar SBA loan schemes across California. My case wasn't isolated harassment. It was evidence in a much larger federal investigation into property acquisition fraud targeting rural landowners. Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's White Collar Crimes Division contacted Patricia directly. They'd been tracking Pinnacle Property Management for 6 months after multiple complaints about identical harassment patterns in 3 counties. Karen's operation was part of what they called forced acquisition networks, organized criminal enterprises using harassment, false complaints, and property sabotage to devalue and force rural property sales. The beautiful irony? Karen's own loan documents provided the federal jurisdiction and organized crime evidence they needed for RICO prosecution. She'd literally documented her own conspiracy for the government. Patricia explained the legal implications with barely contained excitement. Karen violated federal banking laws, mail fraud statutes, and conspiracy charges. Derek's property damage and impersonation of officials constitute civil rights violations. Together, they're looking at minimum 10-year federal sentences. But the best part was still coming. Agent Rodriguez wanted me to continue appearing vulnerable while they built their case. "Let her make the final moves," he said. "Desperate criminals make the biggest, most prosecutable mistakes." I learned something valuable about federal investigations. They move slowly but completely. While Karen thought she was winning her harassment campaign, federal agents were documenting every crime she'd committed over the past 2 years. Her timeline desperation would force her into bigger criminal acts that would seal her fate. The sweet smell of justice felt better than harvest morning coffee as I realized Karen had trapped herself in her own greed. She'd created a federal case against herself while thinking she was cleverly gaming the system. Her 90-day loan deadline was approaching fast, and desperate criminals always make fatal errors. I just had to wait for Karen to destroy herself completely. The rough texture of federal evidence folders in my hands felt like holding Karen's future prison sentence. She had no idea the game had changed from neighborhood dispute to federal conspiracy case. Federal coordination became my new full-time job, and honestly, it was more satisfying than any aerospace project I'd ever managed. Agent Rodriguez and I met weekly at a coffee shop in the next county over, away from Karen's surveillance network. The FBI had been tracking property acquisition fraud schemes across California, and Karen's operation was their golden opportunity to take down an entire network. My case wasn't just about one crazy HOA president. It was about dismantling organized crime targeting rural property owners. "We need you to continue appearing defeated," Rodriguez explained, sliding a folder across the table. "Let her believe she's winning while we document every federal crime. Wear this wire during any interactions with Karen or Derek. We're particularly interested in any bribery attempts or direct threats." The wire felt like wearing justice under my shirt. My attorney Patricia was simultaneously filing preliminary injunctions to stop the immediate harassment while preparing a comprehensive civil RICO lawsuit against both Karen and Derek. She'd calculated damages exceeding $500,000 across all affected families, plus punitive awards that could triple that amount. But the real satisfaction came from building the community intelligence network that would expose Karen's entire operation. The hardware store owner agreed to secretly record Karen's vendor intimidation attempts. The county clerk provided documentation of all 47 false complaints Karen had filed over 6 months. Local restaurant owners revealed details of her business interference campaigns, and the farmers market coordinator agreed to testify about her attempted vendor exclusions. I learned something fascinating about federal mail fraud prosecution. Using postal service to send false government complaints constitutes a federal crime punishable by 20 years per incident. Karen had mailed dozens of fraudulent complaints to county offices, creating multiple felony charges that would stack like cordwood in federal court. The technical aspects were equally damning. Derek's impersonation of government officials, combined with property damage and civil rights violations, triggered federal hate crime enhancements. Their conspiracy to target property owners based on rural lifestyle constituted organized criminal activity under RICO statutes. But my favorite part of the planning was the documentary evidence compilation, security footage showing 47 separate trespassing incidents, recorded phone calls where Karen admitted to whatever it takes property acquisition, financial records proving fraudulent SBA loan applications, email chains between Karen and Derek coordinating harassment timelines. The Rural Property Defense Alliance met weekly at my tasting room, coordinating our legal strategy and preparing for the public revelation that would end Karen's reign of terror. Each family had specific documentation responsibilities, and we'd connected with other harassment victims who'd sold properties under pressure. Our media strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Local newspaper investigative reporter Sarah Chen had agreed to cover the story immediately after arrests. We'd prepared social media campaigns to counter Karen's fake narratives, compiled evidence packages for state real estate licensing boards, and organized community support for the economic damage she'd caused. I maintained tactical deception by continuing to appear financially stressed and emotionally defeated. I allowed Karen small victories to keep her overconfident, pretended to consider selling my property to maintain her timeline pressure, and acted like Derek's aggression was wearing me down. Meanwhile, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was tracing money laundering through HOA management accounts, discovering similar operations in 3 other California counties, and building evidence that Karen's scheme was part of a larger property acquisition fraud network spanning multiple states. The smell of legal documents being prepared felt like the sweet aroma of approaching harvest. Every page represented another year Karen would spend in federal prison. My personal preparation included arranging temporary security upgrades for protection after the arrests, securing business continuity plans during legal proceedings, and briefing my adult children on the situation and potential media coverage. The community support infrastructure was equally important. Local business owners organized campaigns for all affected families. We'd established a legal defense fund for ongoing civil litigation costs, arranged counseling resources for harassment trauma recovery, and prepared economic impact studies showing Karen's damage to the entire local economy. Federal agents set the arrest timeline to maximize evidence gathering while protecting ongoing investigations in other counties. The county supervisor meeting was scheduled as our public revelation venue, with media coordination timed to follow law enforcement action and civil lawsuit filing coordinated with criminal charges for maximum legal impact. The rhythmic sound of document scanners processing hundreds of pages of evidence felt like a countdown timer to Karen's destruction. The metallic taste of anticipation during final planning sessions was nothing compared to how bitter Karen's coffee was going to taste on arrest morning. Agent Rodriguez's final briefing was simple. Let her make the last desperate moves. We've got enough evidence to convict on existing charges, but desperate criminals always provide the best confessions. Karen's 90-day loan deadline was 2 weeks away. Time for her final, fatal mistakes. Karen's desperation reached criminal levels when she realized her timeline was running out and I wasn't breaking fast enough for her loan requirements. Derek's sabotage escalated beyond simple trespassing into outright agricultural terrorism. He began cutting my irrigation lines during critical harvest season, threatening the entire crop that represented my year's income. One morning, I discovered he'd poured industrial herbicide on 20 rows of organic vines worth $25,000. 3 years of careful cultivation destroyed in one night of spite. But Derek wasn't content with property damage anymore. He started planting evidence of code violations by dumping construction debris on my land, then photographing it for county complaints. The FBI wire captured him boasting to Karen about creating violations where none exist. Karen's business attacks intensified beyond anything I'd experienced. She contacted the state ABC board claiming I operated an unlicensed distillery using my legal wine production equipment, filed false police reports about domestic violence incidents at my property when my daughter visited, attempted to have my business insurance canceled by claiming unsafe conditions that existed only in her imagination. Her masterpiece was organizing picket lines at the farmers market, claiming my wines created health hazards for local families. Watching suburban moms with fake protest signs spreading lies about my organic grapes was surreal and infuriating. The FBI surveillance captured everything, but I had to endure the damage while appearing increasingly defeated. The bitter smell of herbicide on poisoned grapevines became my daily reminder of how far Karen would go to force my surrender. Derek's criminal escalation provided the evidence federal prosecutors needed for enhanced charges. He began following me to business meetings and social events, documenting my activities like some kind of discount private investigator. When he confronted my ex-wife at the grocery store claiming I was dangerous to the community, the FBI had sufficient evidence for stalking charges. But his boldest move was attempting to enter my home during daylight hours, claiming inspection authority when I wasn't present. My security system captured him trying to break locks and entering through windows while claiming he was conducting legitimate HOA compliance checks. The worst incident involved Derek threatening visiting wine tourists with citations for trespassing on disputed property. He blocked their cars in my driveway, demanding identification and claiming authority to investigate suspicious activity in our community. One elderly couple from San Francisco was so terrified they called 911, bringing sheriff's deputies who informed Derek he was committing multiple felonies and had zero legal authority over anything. Meanwhile, Karen's community intimidation campaign reached peak insanity. She organized property safety meetings, spreading completely fabricated rumors about chemical contamination from my wine production, distributed flyers claiming vineyard operations created environmental hazards that threatened children's health. Her pressure campaign against the school district was particularly vicious, attempting to have county health department declare my property a public nuisance, based entirely on lies she'd manufactured. The FBI's evidence gathering revealed the full scope of Karen and Derek's criminal conspiracy. Wire recordings captured them planning continuous pressure until bankruptcy or surrender. Financial investigation confirmed loan fraud with specific property acquisition targets. Multiple federal crimes were documented: mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, extortion, civil rights violations. I maintained my appearance of being overwhelmed and financially desperate while secretly coordinating with federal agents building charges that would put both Karen and Derek in prison for decades. The FBI advised me to let them make final, prosecutable moves while protecting the investigation. Karen's timeline pressure meant she'd attempt increasingly desperate tactics. Agent Rodriguez warned that cornered criminals often resort to violence, so additional security measures were implemented while maintaining my facade of vulnerability. The sweet satisfaction of watching Karen destroy herself with every illegal act was tempered by the real damage she was causing to my business and community. But federal justice was approaching, and her loan deadline would force final criminal acts that would seal her fate completely. The sharp sound of water gushing from cut irrigation lines became the soundtrack to Karen's countdown to federal prison. Derek's boot prints in my poisoned soil would soon be matched with federal booking fingerprints. They thought they were winning. They had no idea they were confessing to federal crimes while being recorded by the FBI. With 2 weeks left before her loan default deadline, Karen abandoned any pretense of legality and went straight for criminal bribery and extortion. She appeared at my door on a Tuesday evening with a briefcase full of cash, $50,000 in hundreds, claiming it was a settlement offer for mutual benefit. The FBI wire captured every word as she explained how I could relocate quietly, and she'd handle all the paperwork complications. When I refused, her mask completely slipped. "You don't understand the position you're in," she hissed, the honey-sweet real estate voice replaced by pure venom. "I can plant evidence that'll have you arrested for drug trafficking. I can make sure your business licenses get revoked permanently. I own people in this county." The metallic taste of controlled fury filled my mouth as I listened to her threaten everything I'd built, all while FBI recording equipment captured her confession to bribery, extortion, and conspiracy. But Karen's desperation drove her to even stupider moves. She attempted to bribe the county supervisor, her cousin, to condemn my property through eminent domain for public safety concerns. The FBI had been monitoring his communications for months as part of the broader corruption investigation. Derek's criminal breaking point came 3 days later. Security footage captured him attempting nighttime break-in while I was visiting my daughter in San Diego. He didn't just want to vandalize this time, he was planting methamphetamine in my wine storage facility to create drug charges that would force property forfeiture. The FBI surveillance team watching my property intervened before he could complete the evidence planting, but not before recording him explaining to Karen over phone how drug charges will solve our timeline problem permanently. Karen's false police report campaign reached absurd heights. She filed reports claiming I stalked HOA residents when I drove past Meadowbrook on county roads, accused me of terroristic threats against neighborhood families based on conversations that existed only in her imagination, claimed my security cameras violated privacy of neighboring properties they couldn't even see. Her most desperate lie was filing domestic violence charges claiming I'd threatened her during our bribery meeting. The FBI wire recording proved the entire accusation was fabricated, but it demonstrated how far Karen would go to criminally frame an innocent person. The community pressure reached maximum intensity as Karen threatened economic boycott of any business supporting me. Local restaurants faced coordinated harassment if they continued serving my wines. The farmers market coordinator received daily calls demanding my permanent exclusion from all community events. But Karen made her fatal error when she threatened my adult children directly. Phone calls to my daughter's workplace in San Diego claiming I was under criminal investigation and posed a danger to associates. Attempts to contact my son's employer with similar lies designed to destroy their careers for leverage against me. The FBI classified this as organized criminal harassment with interstate components, adding federal stalking charges to Karen's growing list of felonies. Agent Rodriguez confirmed the federal case was complete with evidence to convict on 23 separate criminal counts. Financial crimes investigation had uncovered $2.3 million in fraud across multiple schemes, with Derek's background revealing prior convictions for harassment and property crimes in Oregon and Nevada. The FBI surveillance captured Karen's final community meeting, where she announced my impending surrender and invited local media to document her successful community leadership. She believed this would be her complete victory celebration. Actually, it was going to be her public arrest ceremony. I prepared for the county supervisor meeting where federal agents would coordinate simultaneous arrests while I presented evidence of the entire conspiracy to the community. The timing was perfect. Karen's overconfidence would make her confession more complete while federal law enforcement documented her crimes in real time. Derek's final criminal act involved threatening arson if I didn't sell within 48 hours. Accidents happen to unprotected properties, he told my answering machine, not knowing federal agents were recording every threat. The rough texture of federal arrest warrants felt like holding justice itself as Agent Rodriguez briefed me on the final operation. Karen and Derek faced minimum 10-year federal sentences, with RICO enhancements potentially doubling their time. Karen's loan deadline was 5 days away. Her federal arrest was in 3 days. The timing couldn't have been more poetic if I'd planned it myself. The cold morning air carried the sweet smell of approaching justice as I prepared for the public revelation that would destroy Karen's criminal enterprise and restore peace to our rural community. They thought they were forcing my surrender. They were actually confessing to federal crimes while being recorded by the FBI. The Sonoma County Supervisor meeting room was packed beyond capacity. 200+ people, including local media, confused HOA residents, and every family Karen had terrorized over the past 3 years. Karen arrived early with prepared victory speech, believing she was about to celebrate forcing my surrender and securing her loan requirements. I appeared defeated, carrying a cardboard box everyone assumed contained surrender documents and property sale agreements. Karen's smug confidence filled the room like cheap perfume as she took the podium, basking in what she thought was her moment of triumph. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, her real estate voice dripping with false concern, "we're here tonight because successful communities require difficult decisions. Marcus Delacroix has finally agreed to relocate his inappropriate business operations to protect our property values and family safety." The crowd murmured approval while I sat in the back row, letting her dig her grave deeper with every lying word. "Through persistent community action and legitimate oversight, we've successfully resolved a serious threat to our neighborhood standard," she continued, gesturing toward me like I was some conquered enemy. "This proves that organized community leadership can protect our investments and our children." That's when I stood up and walked to the podium. "Supervisor Johnson, community members," I said, opening my box to reveal not surrender documents but federal evidence binders. "I'm here to present evidence of criminal fraud, harassment, and conspiracy spanning multiple years and counties." The room went dead silent as I displayed timeline documentation, financial records, and surveillance footage. Karen Pemberton and Derek Pemberton are subjects of federal investigation for organized property acquisition fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. Karen's face went through several shades of confusion, panic, and pure rage as the reality hit her. "This is impossible," she shrieked. "I'm protecting our community from criminal elements." That's when FBI agent Rodriguez identified himself and federal agents positioned throughout the room moved into action. "Karen Pemberton, Derek Pemberton, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations under federal jurisdiction." Derek attempted to flee but was apprehended by officers stationed at all exits. His panicked confession started immediately. "She made me do everything. She said we'd lose the house if I didn't help force property sales." Karen's public breakdown was spectacular and self-incriminating. "You don't understand. These people don't belong in our community. I was protecting property values through legitimate business practices." The crowd heard her racism and entitlement on full display, while federal agents read Miranda rights and applied handcuffs. Local Channel 7 news crew captured the arrests live, broadcasting Karen's meltdown to thousands of viewers who'd been following her community leadership campaign. Social media livestream reached 50,000 local viewers within minutes. Agent Rodriguez announced the federal charges, 23 counts including mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and organized criminal activity under RICO statutes. Both defendants face minimum 10-year federal sentences. Community members who'd been terrorized by Karen's campaigns finally felt safe speaking publicly. 3 families shared stories of identical harassment. Local business owners revealed the economic pressure and intimidation they'd endured. My mic drop moment came when Karen was loaded into the federal transport vehicle. "Karen, you claimed I didn't understand community living. You were right. Real communities support neighbors instead of destroying them for profit. Your property values were never about houses. They were about hatred, greed, and criminal fraud. This community is infinitely better without your kind of leadership." The crowd's applause echoed through the parking lot as federal vehicles drove away with Sonoma County's most notorious criminals. Supervisor Johnson promised immediate ethics investigation of county officials who'd enabled Karen's harassment. State real estate board representatives announced emergency review of Pinnacle property management licensing. The Rural Property Defense Alliance announced our civil lawsuit seeking $2.3 million in damages and permanent injunctive relief. Community members approached with support, apologies, and relief that Karen's reign of terror was finally over. Several revealed they'd witnessed harassment but were afraid to speak up against Karen's perceived authority. Local contractor mentioned the $12,000 she still owed him, now adding to federal restitution calculations. The sharp sound of handcuffs closing and bright flashes of news cameras capturing arrests created the perfect ending to 3 years of documented harassment. The acrid smell of fear sweat from Karen's desperation was finally replaced by the sweet scent of community justice. Federal agents confirmed similar arrests in 3 other California counties, dismantling the entire property acquisition fraud network that had terrorized rural communities across the state. Karen's loan deadline was 3 days away. Her federal sentencing would be in 6 months. The only property she'd be acquiring was a federal prison cell. Justice moved swiftly once federal prosecutors had Karen and Derek's recorded confessions and financial evidence. Within 30 days, a federal grand jury indicted both on 23 criminal counts. Karen and Derek were held without bail due to flight risk. Derek's outstanding warrants in 2 other states and Karen's liquidated assets proved they'd already planned to disappear after completing their fraud scheme. The civil lawsuit settled for $1.8 million, plus comprehensive injunctive relief before reaching trial. Pinnacle Property Management was dissolved with all assets liquidated for victim compensation across multiple counties. Karen's real estate license was permanently revoked by the state board. But the real victory was what happened to our community afterward. I organized the first annual Rural Unity Festival at Wildstone Vineyard 6 months after the arrests. 800 people attended, including families from 3 counties who'd survived similar harassment campaigns. The event featured local businesses, food vendors, live music, and community speakers sharing stories of resilience and recovery. Proceeds supported our newly established legal defense fund, providing assistance for future property rights cases. Watching children play freely on land that Karen had tried to steal while their parents enjoyed wine she'd tried to destroy felt like the sweetest possible revenge. The county passed the Property Rights Protection Ordinance inspired directly by our case. New oversight committees now monitor HOA expansion and enforcement activities, requiring transparent documentation and appeal processes. State legislator Rebecca Martinez introduced comprehensive rural property protection legislation using our evidence as foundation testimony. My vineyard business rebounded stronger than ever. Wine sales increased 300% due to national media attention from the HOA Hell story. I received the California Agricultural Commission's Rural Business Advocate Award and was featured in Wine Spectator as an example of community resilience through crisis. The legal precedents from our case proved invaluable for other harassment victims. Federal courts used our RICO prosecution as template for similar property acquisition fraud schemes. 3 other states adopted California's enhanced rural property protections based on our legislative testimony. But the most meaningful outcome was the Wildstone Foundation I established using settlement money and increased business profits. The nonprofit provides legal assistance for families facing HOA overreach, small business grants for rural entrepreneurs, and partnerships with law schools creating property rights clinics. We've helped 47 families successfully defend against harassment campaigns, prevented 12 forced property sales, and supported rural business development across Northern California. The Foundation's legal clinic has become a model replicated in 15 states. Karen received 8 years in federal prison, plus lifetime prohibition from real estate activities. Derek got 12 years due to prior convictions and fugitive status. Both were ordered to pay $2.3 million restitution to affected families across multiple counties. The federal investigation Karen's case triggered dismantled property acquisition fraud networks in 7 states, resulting in 43 additional arrests and $12 million in victim restitution. Her greed literally brought down an entire criminal enterprise. Personal healing came through unexpected community connections. My relationship with my ex-wife and adult children strengthened during the crisis. They'd witnessed my resilience under pressure and gained new respect for the rural lifestyle choice they'd initially questioned. Property values in our area actually increased after Karen's arrest, proving her protection claims were completely backwards. New families moved to the region specifically because harassment-free rural living became a proven reality, rather than a risky hope. My vineyard won the California State Fair gold medal 6 months after federal arrests, the same grapes Karen and Derek had tried to poison with herbicide. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone who'd followed our story. Local business cooperative formed to resist future intimidation campaigns, creating early warning networks and shared legal resources. The farmers market expanded to include 3 counties, celebrating rural entrepreneurship Karen had tried to destroy. Today, Wildstone Vineyard hosts the annual Property Rights Awareness Day, featuring educational workshops, legal clinics, and community celebration. Last year, we welcomed 7,200 visitors who learned about HOA law, rural property protection, and community resilience. The support group for harassment victims provides ongoing counseling and advocacy training. Several participants have become rural property rights activists, speaking at legislative hearings and supporting other families facing similar challenges. My morning walks through the vineyard now carry the sweet smell of justice alongside ripening grapes. The sound of irrigation systems working properly and tourists laughing during tastings replaced Karen's intimidation soundtrack with community harmony. But here's the story that really proves karma exists. Remember Karen's cousin, the county supervisor who enabled her harassment? FBI investigation revealed he'd accepted $50,000 in bribes to overlook property fraud complaints. He's currently serving 3 years in the same federal facility as Karen. Turns out corruption runs in families, but so does justice. Next story preview. You won't believe what happened when the county tried to use eminent domain to steal my neighbor's family farm for a shopping mall. That adventure involves corrupt commissioners, environmental fraud, and a 90-year-old grandmother who knows more about property law than most attorneys. The fight for rural property rights continues, and this community has proven that organized, documented resistance can defeat even the most sophisticated criminal harassment campaigns. Drop a comment sharing your own HOA nightmare. I read every single story, and some of these experiences need wider attention. Hit subscribe because property rights battles are happening everywhere, and rural communities need to support each other against organized intimidation. Share this story with anyone facing HOA harassment. They need to know they're not alone, there are legal remedies available, and communities can successfully fight back against criminal fraud disguised as neighborhood improvement. The taste of victory never gets old, especially when it's seasoned with federal justice and community healing.